Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
Today, we are opening a file that is arguably one of the most significant case studies in the history of political detention. We're looking at 117 Days, a memoir of confinement and resistance by Ruth First. And before we get in the narrative, I think it's crucial to establish exactly who Ruth First was, because her position in the story is so unique. I mean, she wasn't just an observer, she was a target.
Absolutely. Ruth First was a titan in the anti-apartheid movement. She was a journalist, a really powerful investigative reporter who exposed, labor scandals like the potato farm slavery in Bethel.
Right? She was already on the radar, deeply.
Oh, for years. She was also a member of the South African Communist Party. But for the purpose of today's analysis, the most important fact is that in 1963, she became the first white woman detained under what was called the 90-day law.
And she wrote this memoir in 1965, so very shortly after her release. And she did it specifically to document what happened inside that interrogation room.
To create a record.
Exactly. And the edition we're looking at also includes this really heavy-hitting introduction by Angela Davis, which I think does a fantastic job of pulling these events out of the black and white photos of history and connecting them to the modern era of mass incarceration.
And that connection is vital because right off the bat, I want to frame how we are going to approach this text. It's very easy to read 117 Days simply as a biography or, a tragedy about a woman in prison.
And it is that, it's a powerful human story.
It is. But that is not our mission today. We are not just looking at the story of a prisoner. We are looking at the structure of the prison. We are treating this text as a manual on emergency detention law, as a system of psychological governance.
Okay, so we're moving past what happened, the sort of plot points, and getting into how it works, the actual mechanics of the system.
Precisely. We want to analyze how the legal architecture, the physical design of the interrogation room, and the highly racialized enforcement of these laws all work together to produce compliance.
To what end? What's the output they're looking for?
Well, we're looking at how a state manufactures isolation and, crucially, how it controls the narrative, both inside the prisoner's head and in the world outside.
It's the difference between looking at a car crash and looking at the engineering of the brakes that failed.
That's a great analogy.
Or in this case, the brakes that were deliberately removed.
That is a very fair analogy. We are looking at the mechanics of state power when the safeguards are systematically stripped away.
Okay, so to understand the machine, we have to start with the blueprint. And in this case, the blueprint is this piece of legislation, the 90-day law.
Clause 17 of the General Law Amendment Act of 1963.
It sounds so incredibly bureaucratic, doesn't it? General Law Amendment. It sounds like something you'd just gloss over in a newspaper.
And that's part of the point. The language is intentionally mundane.
But in the book, First describes this law as the engine of the entire nightmare. What exactly made this specific legislation so potent? What did it do?
It was a fundamental shift in the legal burden of proof and really the entire concept of justice. The core mechanism of Clause 17 allowed any commissioned officer to arrest anyone without a warrant whom he merely suspected of having information about a political offense.
Okay, I want to pause on that for a second because that's a huge departure. Suspected of having information, not suspected of committing a crime yourself.
Correct. That is the critical distinction. You are detained not because you are charged with a crime, but because you are viewed as a repository of potential intelligence. You become an object.
Like a library book, the state has decided to check out by force.
That's a good way to put it. And the law stated you could be held until such person has replied satisfactorily to all questions.
And there it is. That phrase, replied satisfactorily, that is doing a massive amount of heavy lifting in that sentence, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because who defines satisfactory?
The interrogator. The police. It creates a perfectly closed loop. If you tell the truth, but the police don't believe you, or they don't like the answer, or they think you're holding something back, you haven't replied satisfactorily.
So you just stay in the cell.
You stay in the cell. It gives them complete arbitrary power.
It effectively removes the judiciary from the equation entirely. Usually you have a judge who decides if there's enough evidence to hold someone, they're the check on police power.
But here, the police are the judge, the jury, and the jailer all rolled into one. It's a self-contained system.
And this is where the text gets truly terrifying when it comes to the duration. I mean, the law says you could be held for 90 days. It's in the name.
But that's the great deception. As First points out, and as the detectives explicitly, almost cheerfully told her, that's just the unit of measurement. It's not a limit. It's a brick. You can just keep stacking them.
Right, there's this chilling moment in the book where a detective explains it to her very calmly. He says something like, this is the first period of 90 days. There can be another after that, and yet another.
It creates a terrifying circularity. The detention is theoretically finite 90 days, which makes it sound, almost reasonable to the outside world.
It sounds temporary, an emergency measure.
But in practice, it is indefinite. The moment the 90 days are up, they can walk you to the curb, release you for 10 seconds, and then rearrest you on the spot for another 90 days. The clock just resets.
So effectively, they've just removed habeas corpus.
Entirely. And for listeners who might not be familiar with that legal term, habeas corpus is it's one of the cornerstones of Western law. It's essentially the show me the body law.
The right to be brought before a judge to determine if your imprisonment is lawful.
Exactly. It's the mechanism that prevents the state from just disappearing people. The 90-day law suspends that. It converts the prisoner from a legal subject with rights into an administrative object to be processed.
And first, being legally savvy, she catches on to this distinction really early on in her interrogation. She has this back and forth with a man named Warrant Officer Nell, who we'll definitely talk about more later.
The bureaucrat.
Yes, the ultimate bureaucrat. She keeps asking him, are you preparing a prosecution? Am I being charged with a crime? She's trying to figure out if she's in a legal process she understands.
And Nell just reads the act to her. He's very calm about it. He clarifies that she is detained for interrogation, not for trial, not pending charges. For interrogation. The interrogation is the purpose.
Which, if we strip away all the euphemisms and the bureaucratic language, effectively legalizes kidnapping.
It legalizes kidnapping by the state under the guise of national security. And that changes the incentive structure completely. The goal isn't justice or a trial. The goal is to extract information, to map out and fracture political networks.
But to send a message.
And to send a message. It's about signaling sovereign power, showing that the state can take you, hold you for as long as it wants, and there is absolutely nothing the courts or anyone else can do about it. It's a demonstration of total control.
And once they have you, once you're inside that system, the next step is the environment itself. Let's talk about the physical reality of this detention. Because First is a journalist. Her descriptions of the cell are, well, they're incredibly vivid, but they also feel strategic. She's noticing the details that are designed to drive you crazy.
She is documenting the architecture of opacity. The cell isn't just a place to hold a body, it's a tool to deconstruct a mind.
She describes the cell as catacomb-like. It's cold, concrete, damp. But the detail that really stuck with me first was the lighting. She calls it the single yellow eye.
The naked electric bulb.
Right, just hanging from the ceiling, burning 24/7. It's never dark, but it's never quite bright either. It's a permanent, sickly twilight.
And what does that do to a person? It destroys your sense of time. Day and night merge into one endless, monotonous gray period. Your circadian rhythm, your body's natural clock, is completely thrown into chaos. Sleep becomes difficult, fragmented. It's a form of low-level, constant disorientation.
And then there are the walls. The walls are painted black 2/3 of the way up.
Which is a very specific psychological choice. If you paint a room black up to eye level, it creates a visual compression. It makes the space feel smaller, like it's constantly pressing in on you. It's claustrophobic by design.
And then there's the grime. This isn't a sterile, high-tech isolation chamber. It's filthy. She talks about the sticky black soot on the window, which is triple barred, so no real light gets in anyway.
And the blankets, the smell.
The blankets smell like moldy potatoes. It's this combination of sensory deprivation, no meaningful sights or sounds, but also sensory degradation. Everything you touch, smell, and see is meant to degrade you.
It is all designed to remove social reference points. When you are in a normal environment, your identity is constantly reinforced by your interactions, by the objects you use, by the simple passage of day and night. The cell removes all of that. By keeping the light on, they disrupt your clock. By leaving the dirt, they degrade your sense of self-worth. It destabilizes the subject to make them more pliable for interrogation.
It's preconditioning.
It's the first stage of the attack.
Speaking of destabilization, we have to talk about the spy hole. the penny-sized peephole in the door, First becomes obsessed with this eye looking in.
It is the panopticon in its purest, most distilled form.
Could you just explain the panopticon concept for us in this context?
Yeah.
This is such a powerful idea.
Of course, it's a concept that comes from the philosopher Jeremy Bentham and was later expanded by Michel Foucault. The idea is a prison design, usually circular, where a single guard in a central tower can see every prisoner in their cell, but the prisoners can never see the guard.
So they don't know when they're being watched.
Exactly. And because a prisoner doesn't know when they're being watched, they have to assume they are always being watched. They begin to police their own behavior. The surveillance becomes internalized.
And First describes exactly that. She mentions she can't see out. Her own eye blocks the light if she tries to look through the peephole. But the wardresses can always look in.
At any moment. Unannounced.
And they use it to police her posture. She's not allowed to lie on the bed during the day. She has to sit on a stool. If she lies down, a key turns in the lock and she's reprimanded. They're controlling her body in space, constantly.
Think about what that does to your sense of autonomy, of privacy. It is a fundamental violation of the self. It enforces total dependency. You are never, ever alone, yet you are completely, utterly isolated.
You're an object of surveillance, not a person with a private life. It effectively tells the prisoner, you have no secrets from us. We own this space, and by extension, we own your body.
It's about breaking down the boundary between the public and the private self until only the public, observable self remains.
And time is the other big weapon here, isn't it? First writes about time in a way that feels almost physical, almost tangible. She uses this analogy of sand.
The hourglass.
Yeah, she says time feels like sand dribbling through an hourglass, but it's stuck, it's clogged. You have to physically push time to make it move.
That is such a profound insight into the psychology of solitary confinement. In normal life, time is structured for us by external events work, meals, our commute, social feedback, the sun rising and setting.
It has a rhythm.
It has a rhythm. It has a structure. In the cell, those structures are gone. Time becomes an amorphous void. It's just a shapeless, endless present.
She talks about staring at her watch. She's allowed to keep it initially. She glues her eyes to the minute hand. She knows it's moving, logically, but she can't see it moving. It's like the watch pot that never boils, but expanded into weeks and months.
And this is not accidental. This is central to the design. The interrogation cycles are deliberately erratic to disrupt time. You don't know when they're coming. You don't know how long you've been in the cell. Days blend together. Without schedules, time loses its structural function and becomes another source of anxiety.
But she fights back against this. And this is one of my favorite details in the whole book, because it shows such incredible resilience. She creates what she calls a counter-architecture.
The calendar.
Yes. She has a needle and thread from a mending kit, and she starts secretly stitching a calendar behind the lapel of her dressing gown. One tiny stroke for a day, a horizontal stitch to mark off a week.
This is writing as resistance. It's a micro-act of rebellion. The system is trying to dissolve her reality to make her exist in a timeless limbo where only the state has authority and defines her existence.
But she's keeping her own time.
By physically marking time hidden away behind her lapel, she is reconstructing the reality the system is trying to destroy. She is asserting her own agency. She is saying, I exist, time is passing, I'm keeping score, I am a subject, not just an object.
It's such a small act, literal stitches in a piece of fabric.
Yeah.
But it feels massive in that context. It's her saying, you don't own my perception of time.
Exactly. And she needs that anchor, that small piece of solid ground, because the next layer of the system is the interrogation itself. And this is where the psychological governance becomes active and verbal.
The game of information.
And it is a game. Specifically, it's a game of information asymmetry. The entire structure is built on the fact that they know everything and she knows nothing.
So how does the board look from her perspective? What can she actually see?
Almost nothing. Think about the position of the detainee. First doesn't know what the police know. She doesn't know who else has been arrested. She doesn't know who has talked or what they've said. She doesn't know what evidence they have or if they have any evidence at all.
The interrogators act as the sole source of reality. They are the only window to the outside world, and the glass is warped.
Precisely. So she adopts a strategy. She decides not to answer any questions until she knows if she's being charged. It's a classic legal move. But the police just counter. They refuse to charge her until she answers questions. It's a complete stalemate.
But it's a stalemate where one player is in a concrete cell and the other one gets to go home at night.
Exactly. The police hold all the cards. They can manipulate her perception of the outside world. They can lie and say her comrades have sold her out and she has no way to verify it. They control the flow of all information.
And they use a very specific cast of characters to deliver that information. First gives us these incredibly vivid portraits of her interrogators. It's almost like a twisted theater troupe or
Yeah.
stock characters from a very dark drama.
Who stands out to you from that cast?
Well, first there's Warrant Officer Nell, the one she speaks to initially. First describes him as being cold as a fish. He has a toneless voice, a kind of formal, distant politeness. He's the bureaucrat.
The banality of the process. He represents the procedure. He's not angry. He's not emotional. He's just filing paperwork. His detachment makes the whole situation feel inevitable, like an administrative process you can't fight.
Then, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you have Swanpole. He is the stuff of nightmares. She calls him bullfrog-like, squat, red-faced. He's the pure bully.
The enforcer.
He uses vulgar abuse, he screams, he slams his fists on the table, he intimidates. He's all about brute psychological force.
He represents the threat. He is the physical manifestation of the violence the state is capable of.
And then, to complete this triad, you have a man named Van Zyl, the sympathetic one, the good cop.
The one who offers her headache powders.
Yes.
Yeah.
The guy who offers her aspirin for the headache that Swanpole's giving her. He speaks in this weirdly gentle sing-song voice.
This is the classic good cop, bad cop routine, but it's systematized. This is not just random personality quirks of the officers on duty. It is a calibrated system. It's a psychological toolkit.
So you have the terrifying force, Swanpole, which creates intense stress and fear.
Then you have the cold, unstoppable machine, Nell, which creates a sense of hopelessness and futility.
And then you have the potential savior, Van Zyl, who offers a way out of the pressure cooker, a friendly face.
They are trying to find a wedge. They are creating a controlled environment of stress and then offering a single controlled point of release. They are looking for a cracking point. They want to create a psychological state where the prisoner feels that the only way to escape the bully is to confide in the friend.
It's a pincer movement on the mind.
It is. And the arguments they use are just as calibrated. First lists them out, and they are so psychologically targeted. They play on her deep sense of isolation. They say, everyone else is talking, you're the only one holding out, which is designed to create a fear of being a fool, a fear of being left behind. No one wants to be the last one suffering for a cause that everyone else has already abandoned. It attacks your ego and your loyalty simultaneously.
Then they pivot to betrayal. They tell her, your leaders are cowards. They're drinking brandy abroad in London while you sweat in here for them.
And that is designed to fracture collective identity. It's a poison dart aimed right at the heart of the movement's solidarity. If you believe your network has abandoned you, your loyalty to that network weakens. Why protect people who aren't protecting you?
And finally, they use the argument of inevitability. We know everything anyway. We're just trying to see if you'll cooperate.
That's the closer. If they already know everything, then your silence achieves nothing. It's a tactic to induce complete hopelessness. The goal of all these narratives is to make the prisoner feel that resistance is not just painful, but utterly futile.
It's psychological siege warfare. But here is where the analysis has to get deeper and much darker. This system doesn't treat everyone the same way. We cannot talk about this without addressing the apartheid elephant in the room.
No, absolutely not. We cannot talk about the South African prison system without talking about race. The hierarchy of the outside world is not just replicated, it is distilled and amplified inside the prison walls.
It's almost absurd, in a really grim way. First is a political prisoner, right? She's an enemy of the state, a communist threat in their eyes. But she's also a white woman. And in 1963 South Africa, that means she is still somehow madam.
Even in solitary confinement, even as the state's enemy.
She writes about this profound irony. She is forbidden books, visitors, or any contact with other political prisoners. Total isolation. But every single morning, African prisoners, black women, are brought into her cell to clean it.
And First's role in this.
She sits in bed like a madam, as she puts it, while they get on their hands and knees to scrub her floor. The system is so deeply committed to racial stratification that it maintains the master-servant dynamic even when the master is a prisoner of that same state.
This reinforces the ideology. It suggests that racial hierarchy is so natural, so fundamental, that it persists even within a punitive system designed to break down individuals. The white body, even a politically dissident one, is treated with a bizarre form of deferential separation, while the black body is treated as a unit of labor or an object of violence.
And the treatment of those black prisoners is just horrifying. First describes this cleaning ritual she's forced to watch. The wardresses, who are white Afrikaners, scream at the black women prisoners, and they force them to do the cha-cha and the twist.
This is a form of profound mockery and degradation. It's not about cleaning the floor, it's about performance. It's turning labor into a minstrel show for the amusement and power trip of the guards.
They have cleaning rags under their feet, and they have to dance shuffle across the floor to polish it, all while being screamed at with the most vile racist abuse. The language the wardresses use, she records terms like swartslange, which means black snakes, is just pure, unadulterated dehumanization.
And this differentiation isn't just about cleaning floors. It goes to the very heart of the interrogation incentives and methods. We have to understand that the pressure applied to Ruth First, as intense as it was largely psychological. But for black detainees,
It was a different world. We have to talk about the case of Look Smart and Goodall.
this is a pivotal moment in the text, and it's where the two tiers of the system are laid bare. Look Smart and Goodall was a black detainee, an ANC member, held under the very same 90-day law as Ruth First. Same legal category, same suspicion.
But his experience was fundamentally different.
He died in detention. The official police story was that it was suicide. They said he hanged himself in his cell.
Which was a common explanation for deaths in detention at the time.
A very common one. But First details the inquest that followed. And the facts that came out there are brutal and undeniable. The cross-examination of the police officers revealed that Ngoudal had been systematically tortured. He had been beaten. He had been given electric shocks. He had been pinioned, a technique where your knees and arms are tied together behind your back, contorting your body into an agonizing position for hours.
So for black detainees, the incentive to talk wasn't just psychological games. It was brute force. It was torture.
Exactly. For the white politicals, first, the violence was primarily psychological, at least at this stage in 1963. They were leveraged symbolically. Their detention was a message to other white liberals and radicals. But for black detainees, the system used direct, often lethal, force.
It's a calibrated system of violence.
Perfectly put. It stabilizes itself through this calibrated violence. The state knows exactly how far it can go with which demographic to maintain control without causing too much of a political scandal within its own white support base. A white woman dying in detention would be a major problem, a black man. Tragically, it was considered part of the cost of doing business.
It's a tiered system of oppression. And what's so scary is how normal the people running this system seem to think it is. And this brings us back to the interrogators, to the Nells and the Swampole.
The bureaucracy of it all, the day-to-day grind of oppression. First observes the detectives, and she notes that they don't look like monsters from a movie. They wear tall hats and government-issue suits.
They look like accountants or mid-level managers. They look boring.
This connects directly to Hannah Arendt's famous concept of the banality of evil. These men do not view themselves as sadists, for the most part. They view themselves as functionaries. They are doing a job. They are part of a state apparatus.
First actually uses the phrase little Eichmanns in the text to describe them. She says they justify torture as state business or simply their duty.
And that framing allows them to detach their personal morality from their professional actions. If the state, in its wisdom, has deemed this necessary for security, then it is just a task to be completed efficiently. I am just following orders. It diffuses responsibility.
There is this one interaction in the book that sums up this entire mindset perfectly. First asks a high-ranking colonel for a copy of the jail regulations. She wants to know the rules. It's a very lawyerly, logical request. Show me the text that governs my life here.
She's trying to find a solid thing to hold on to, a rule book.
And the colonel just taps his own chest and says, I am the regulations. I am the regulation.
That is the state of exception in a nutshell. That single sentence. In a system of emergency detention, the law is not a written text that you can appeal to. The law becomes embodied by their enforcer. The police officer, the colonel, is the law. His whim is the rule.
It's terrifying because it means the rules can change minute by minute, depending on the colonel's mood or his objectives for that day. There's no external appeal. There is no higher authority to go to.
And this creates a brutal feedback loop that sustains the whole system. The police logic, as First notes it, is we don't arrest an innocent man.
Which is already a flawed premise, but it gets worse.
It becomes we arrest first, assess afterwards.
So the arrest itself becomes the proof of guilt. In the system's eyes, the very fact that you are in that cell means you must have done something or must know something. If you weren't guilty, we wouldn't have arrested you.
It's a perfect self-validating circle, and any information they extract, no matter how it's obtained, justifies the initial arrest and any further detention. It's a self-sustaining machine for producing compliance.
And just when you think you understand the rules of this machine, it does something that completely breaks you. We have to talk about the release. This feels like the psychological climax of the entire book.
It is the breaking point. It's the system's cruelest, most calculated move.
So could you walk us through this? First, has finished her 90 days. She has counted every single one of them on the lapel of her dressing gown. She has held out. She hasn't broken.
She has survived. She has endured the isolation, the interrogations, the whole psychological onslaught.
She is told, officially, that she's being released. They come to her cell. They tell her to pack her bag. She's driven out of the prison gates. She steps onto the pavement. She sees the street, the cars. She breathes free air for the first time in 3 months. She thinks, I made it. I won.
And then,
Before she can even take a full step, before the car is even pulled away, 2 detectives tap her on the shoulder. She is rearrested. Right there, on the spot, for another 90 days.
this is not just cruelty for cruelty's sake. It is a calculated psychological break. It is a piece of theater designed for an audience of one.
It absolutely crushed her. She says she went back to the very same cell, sat on the bed, and just sobbed uncontrollably. She talks about a pincer feeling in her stomach, just a physical sensation of being crushed.
Think about the design of that moment. If they had simply come to her cell on day 89 and said, "We're extending your detention," it would have been awful, but she would have remained in the fighting mindset. Her psychological defenses would have remained up.
Right, she would have stayed armored. She would have seen it as part of the same battle.
By letting her leave, by letting her taste freedom, by letting her see the normal world for just 30 seconds, they forced her to reset her psychological defenses. They let her drop her guard completely, feel that moment of elation and relief, and then they smashed it.
It's designed to induce total hopelessness, to show her that the system's power is not just absolute, but arbitrary and theatrical. It's a demonstration.
It proves that the 90-day law is a lie. It's a life law, just broken into 90-day chunks for administrative convenience. It tells the prisoner, you will never get out unless we decide to let you out. The calendar doesn't matter. The law doesn't matter. The rules don't matter. Only we matter.
It's just devastating to read, and yet she didn't break. Not completely. I mean, she wrote this book. She got the story out.
And that brings us to the final part of this, to the legacy of this document. The memoir itself is a profound act of resistance.
How so? In what way is the writing itself a form of fighting back?
The system's entire goal was to dissolve her identity, to silence her, to make her a non-person whose story would be told only by her captors. By writing 117 days, she reconstructs her own identity on her own terms. She documents the abuse. She names the interrogators. She turns the surveillance back on them. She creates a permanent record that they cannot erase.
She reclaims the narrative from the state.
Exactly. And she discovers she wasn't alone in this impulse. One of the most moving parts of the book is when she's finally allowed into the exercise yard. She finds a door where previous prisoners have scratched their names and messages into the wood.
The graffiti archive. It's an amazing moment.
It is. She sees W.K. loves freedom forever. That's Wolfie Kodesh, another activist. She sees names of people she knows, people who have passed through this same system.
It's like a secret message board for the resistance, passed down through time.
It proves that a community exists, even in the depths of solitary confinement. It's a testament. I was here. I survived. We are still fighting. It directly counters the isolation tactics we discussed earlier. It breaks the monopoly on reality that the interrogators tried so hard to build.
And this idea of documentation as resistance connects so well to the introduction by Angela Davis. Davis doesn't just treat this as a history book about apartheid South Africa. She connects it directly to the present.
She draws a direct, unbroken line between the 1963 detention of Ruth First and the post-9/11 war on terror.
That's a big leap for some people to make. How does she connect those two seemingly disparate moments?
Through the techniques, through the systemic architecture, sensory deprivation, indefinite detention without trial, the suspension of habeas corpus, the creation of legal black sites where normal rules don't apply. Davis argues that when these things are framed as necessary security measures against an existential threat, they become normalized.
So what happened in Pretoria in 1963 is structurally similar to what happens in places like Guantanamo Bay or the CIA black sites.
That is precisely the argument. The legal justifications might differ, the enemies might have different names, but the system design, the opacity, the interrogation logic, the use of psychological governance is remarkably, chillingly consistent across time and geography.
It really raises the question, why do we keep building these systems? If their abuses are documented, why do they persist?
Because they work, at least for the state's immediate purposes. They consolidate power, they terrify opposition movements, they remove the problem people from the political equation, at least for a time. They produce a semblance of control.
But they also create resistance. As we've seen, Ruth First eventually got out. She went into exile. She kept writing. She kept fighting. She never stopped.
But the system has a long memory. And this brings us to the final, brutal provocation of her story.
The end of the book. The feeling she has.
First writes, upon her final release, "When they left me in my own house at last, I was convinced that it was not the end, that they would come again."
She knew it wasn't over.
And they did come again. In 1982, Ruth First was assassinated. She was living in exile in Mozambique, working at a university. The South African security police sent her a letter bomb. It killed her instantly.
So she refused to be corrected.
Yeah.
She refused to be silent. And the system followed her across borders years later to extinguish her voice for good.
It shows that the crisis in perception wasn't hers. She saw the system perfectly clearly for what it was. The crisis belongs to anyone who thinks these systems are just temporary aberrations, that they can be neatly put away when the emergency is over. They are designed to be permanent. They are designed to pursue the subject until the subject is extinguished.
That is a heavy place to end. But it's exactly why we need to read books like this, to see the machinery for what it is.
Absolutely. 117 Days reveals a nested system. You have a law within a political ideology, you have the interrogation techniques within a bureaucracy, and you have the individual's isolation within the state's attempt at total narrative control.
So we've mapped the design, the 90-day law. We've mapped the incentives, compliance, and the fracturing of networks. And we've mapped the outcomes, isolation, psychological trauma, and, for some, death.
And we've also seen that even in the face of that totalizing system, the human impulse to document, to resist, to scratch a name on a door, to sew a hidden calendar into a dressing gown remains one of the most powerful forces there is.
A huge credit to Ruth First for leaving us this roadmap, this manual. If you want to understand the architecture of state detention, you really have to read 117 Days, a memoir of confinement and resistance. You can find it at your local library or any good bookstore.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind crisis and perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.